And that's the principle of unity, gets us even closer to love. Another interesting thing about unity is we don't always even have to like the person. But if we feel that deep sense of shared identity or bond, we are much more likely to do something to try to help that individual. In large part, our success and happiness rests on getting people to say yes to us. But I hope people will see that we can go to a deeper level, a level that does right by people and allows us to feel really good about ourselves in the midst of that as well.
That's Brian Ahearn. He is the Chief Influence Officer at Influence People. An international trainer and consultant, Brian specializes in applying the science of influence in everyday situations. His new book, Influenced from Above, Where Faith and Influence Meet, shares how faith and psychology come together to transform your leadership. So you'll learn 1, how modern psychology and the Bible support each other, 2, how to build instant rapport with anyone, and 3, the master key to cementing your authority. And if you want a quick summary write-up of these actionable takeaways, I recommend you sign up for the free Gold Nugget email newsletter found at awesomeatyourjob.com. I'm Pete Mikitis. This is How to Be Awesome at Your Job. And now, here's Brian. Brian, welcome back.
It's great to be back, Pete. Nice to see you.
It's good to see you. And you shared earlier that you are now a grandpa.
Yes, it's so much better than people tell you. They tell you all these great things. The way I would equate it is people can tell you about falling in love, but once you fall in love, it's so much better than anybody can describe. And grandparenting is the same way.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Well, I'm excited to chat about your latest book, Influenced from Above, Where Faith and Influence Meet. Tell us, what's the story here?
Well, the story is a continuation of the book I wrote called The Influencer, Secrets to Success and Happiness. And it follows that main character, John Andrews, and he's about 18 months into his retirement, and he's feeling a little empty. He's had a great life. He's done really well in business, but he's feeling a little bored, like there has to be more to life than just enjoying the fruits of my labor. And he ultimately gets involved with his church in a community center building project, and he has to begin to straddle the line of not only what helped him succeed in business, but also dealing with a faith-based community. And through his studies and interactions, he begins to see this connection between Cialdini's principles of influence and biblical tenets. And so the story fleshes that out with a lot of different characters and some twists and turns and things like that.
Well, intriguing. So biblical tenets, well, first of all, let's address that right up front. For folks who aren't so much into Christianity or any faith tradition, do you see value in this book for them as well?
Yes, because so many of the things that are talked about are timeless in terms of they've been around as long as humanity. One example, we know about reciprocity. If I do a good turn for you, you feel a sense of obligation to want to do something for me. That's been around as long as human beings have been around. Jesus said, it's better to give than receive, and do unto others as you would have them do unto you. So he was really talking about reciprocity. So I think that the storyline will help people really see whether they want to talk about biblical connections or more generally spiritual connections. I think that they will see that so many of the things that Cialdini and other social scientists have proven via research and experiments, that these things have been talked about for thousands of years by very wise people.
Okay, then. So these principles of influence are fantastic, and we've chatted about them a couple of times on the show, as well as we had Bob Cialdini himself also speaking to them. So could you unpack a little bit about some of the extra ancient perspective on each of them?
To start with, as we were discussing before we jumped on air, what spurred this book on was my daughter's question. She had seen me present here in Columbus, Ohio, many, many years ago. And we had lunch. We had a great discussion about what I had shared. And then she asked this question. She said, Dad, what I want to know is where's God in all this? Where does he fit into this psychology that you are teaching people? And it was just an off-the-cuff conversation. And that was the genesis for the idea of the book. But one of the things I remember telling her, I said, Abigail, in business, we may not talk about love, but if we employ this principle of liking the right way, we can get pretty close to it. When we're not looking to get people to like us, just so we can get them to say yes and move our agenda forward, when we instead focus on coming to like the people that we're with, that's what changes everything. Because Pete, the more that you see that, hey, this guy Brian, he really does seem to care about me. That's what opens you up to whatever I might ask. But at the same time, because I'm getting to know and like you, I do want what's best for you. And so we've really gone from transactional to relational in terms of our interaction. And to me, that's getting pretty close to love. Love is about doing what is best for others, even at a sacrifice to yourself. And so we can get pretty close if we choose to engage this principle of liking the right way. And then it transforms our giving, right? So when we talk about reciprocity and, I do a good turn for you and you feel like you should do something for me, but I'm not just doing something to get you to do something in return. Because I've come to know and like you, now I really want what's best for Pete. And so therefore, I'm looking for ways to genuinely help you. And even if it's not the right thing, there's grace coming from you because you know that I like you and care for you and that I'm really trying to help you. I just may not understand exactly the best way to do it in that moment. But that's the kind of thing that transforms a relationship. And so our conversation just started going down the line, talking about these different principles and why coming to know and like somebody, in other words, getting close to that love, really can begin to transform how we interact, how we do business, and how we form relationship.
Certainly. Well, I'd like to go into some depth with each of the 6 principles there. So we've touched a bit about reciprocity.
We could talk about unity.
Unity?
Yeah, unity. Okay, now unity is one of the relationship building principles. And so it goes deeper even than the principle of liking. So when we know that there's unity there, in other words, when we have a shared identity or a deep bond, that transcends liking. And the interesting thing about unity is we will do things for people that we're unitized with that we might not even do for some of our closest friends. I mean, you take, for example, if somebody needs a kidney, we're probably going to help a family member first and foremost because we're genetically wired to help our species go on. And that is very self-sacrificial to do something like give a kidney to somebody else. You're not looking for anything in return. But here's the neat thing about unity is when I'm helping you, Pete, and we have unity, it's almost as if I'm helping myself. I mean, when I do things for my grandson, it does wonders for me, right? He is my flesh and blood relative, and I will do anything for him. I will make any sacrifices for him. And that's the principle of unity, which I think really gets us even closer to love. Because again, I said earlier, love is self-sacrificial. And another interesting thing about unity is we don't always even have to like the person. But if we feel that deep sense of shared identity or bond, we are much more likely to do something to try to help that individual. And so now we've really gone deep in the relationship aspect, hopefully starting with liking, but maybe discovering unity. And I think that transforms the relationships that we have on a personal and professional level.
Can we talk more about some of the ways that unity comes about?
Unity, first and foremost, by genetics, our flesh and blood, our family, we are naturally unitized with them. Another great example from my lifetime was my father, who served in the Marines. And one thing he said was, I still value Marine friendships above all others, even if they weren't from Vietnam. There's an invisible bond that joins us forever. If a Marine has a need, others will step in and help. It must be the result of having gone through such terrible times together. So my dad didn't really know much about the principles that I teach, but he recognized there was this invisible bond. And that word bond is really significant to the point where if a Marine had a need, others step in. Doesn't matter how well you know them, doesn't even matter if you like them. They are one of us, and therefore we will do whatever we have to for that individual. So again, from my life, that's the best example that I've seen of the principle of unity outside of the family relationship.
Mm-hmm. And what's interesting about that notion is that in some sort of groups, some folks will experience it and others will not. I'm thinking in terms of if it's a faith community, if it's being an alumna from a university. It's interesting. Like sometimes we feel it and other times we don't. What are the core drivers behind that?
Well, I think the proximity and the closer that you are to people. So, your example of like a university, certain universities have great reputation. They do a really good job of making people who go to those universities feel something special and significant. Certainly, if you and I went to the same university and graduated in the same class, we would probably feel a deeper sense of unity than if I had gone to school with somebody who graduated 10 years before or 10 years after. We'll still have it. It may not be as significant because you and I would have gone through the same things at the same time, maybe had the same teachers, remembered the same things that were happening on campus that create an emotional bond for us. So yes, there will be times, whether it's organizations or faith-based communities, where you'll have a unity, but you can have it even stronger.
Very good. And then do you think about the principles of spirituality within that?
Well, there's a verse in the Bible where it says that there's neither Jew nor Greek, slave nor free, male nor female. We are all one in Christ Jesus. So that's what Christ was pointing his disciples toward, that there was a sense of unity, especially before his crucifixion. He was praying that they would be one as he is one with the Father. And so that's really how faith, I think, comes in. Again, we're seeing this thousands of years before anybody was talking about a principle called unity, but people who were extremely wise and connected understood that that was extremely significant. If those disciples were unitized, they were much more likely to be there and support one another in what became, for I think virtually all of them, except for the Apostle John, it led to their own self-sacrificial deaths.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, now let's hear some ancient depth and goodness associated with the principles of commitment and consistency.
Well, with commitment, Bible talks about, let your yes be yes and your no be no, and don't make vows that you cannot repay. So again, to a personal consistency, and that principle says that we feel an internal psychological pressure, but also external social pressure to be consistent in what we say and what we do. So first and foremost, if we are consistent, we generally feel better about ourselves, which is a huge driver. Nobody likes to feel bad about themselves. So we work very hard to keep our word. But nonetheless, we need to be taught that. From childhood, we are taught about, don't lie and do what you say. And so we begin to get that sense of how important it is to do what we said we would do.
Well, and now as you're dropping some verses here, I'm forming some connections here. I'm thinking about the measure with which you measure will be measured out unto you. So we've got some sort of honesty, commitment, consistency, as well as reciprocity. It's like, well, if you're cheating others with bogus measurements, then likewise, you might expect them to do so, as well as in the Our Father prayer, forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us, in similar format.
Yeah. So in that case, we have been given something, and that is forgiveness. Now, God doesn't need us to reciprocate that back toward him, but he encourages us to then freely give that to others because it was freely given to us. So it is engaging a reciprocity, but it's more in the form of a pay it forward. I've done this for you. I hope you'll do this for others who are in need of this. And I think when we really start to come to the recognition that we do need forgiveness, then it becomes a lot easier to realize, well, other people are like me, and this has benefited me tremendously, this burden kind of taken off my shoulders. I should try to do the same and encourage others by being that kind of forgiving individual. And then again, I am mirroring what Christ was teaching his disciples. If you don't forgive, how do you expect your heavenly Father to forgive you? But if you won't forgive those who've trespassed against you?
Certainly. Well, and now perhaps a bigger question is, I think that it's quite possible for folks to twist, to abuse the word in terms of thinking, oh, okay, so Brian says it's all good, according to God himself, to unload rock and roll with wild abandon, these influence principles. Do you think are some of the key checks in terms of being genuinely ethical, moral with the use of these things?
I have an interesting quote in the beginning of the book where I talk about that I don't see faith and science as in conflict. I get excited when I see that science confirms what faith has talked about for thousands of years. And the example that I shared was from a book called Sway by Ori and Ram Brafman. And they were talking about brain imaging studies that showed there were two distinct centers in our brain. One lights up or is engaged when we are doing things for an altruistic reason. The other is engage when we are doing things for a reward, but never do the two parts of that brain engage at the same time. In other words, you're either doing it for an altruistic reason or you're doing it for a reward. And that goes back to something that Jesus said too. He said, you can't serve God and mammon or money. You will either love one or love the other. You can't serve two masters. And so when I read that study, I just thought, wow, this is so interesting that we were being encouraged. And I know people might think, well, I can do things to get a little reward. I'm okay with that. It's really about what you're starting with. Am I trying to truly benefit or help this individual regardless of what may come back to me or what it might cost me? That's really probably very close to the altruistic. But if I'm doing something like I could be giving a lot of money to a charity, wonderful for the charity, but am I doing it because I so believe in that, or I'm doing it for a tax break? And we know a lot of people do things because they want the tax break. Well, you've just received your reward.
Yeah, or the influence or the cachet or the praise, your name on something. That's intriguing. And then there's also this notion, I've heard similarly with these brain studies, that under certain circumstances, the parts of our brain light up associated with sort of the using of tools, and then people can sort of fall into that category. It's like, oh, you are a means to my end. And then that's not such a great spot to be in.
Yes, people aren't tools. I look at them and I say they're children of God, created in the image of God. And so therefore I should treat them as such. And let me be clear about this too. I am in no way perfect or even great at this. I mean, it is a process that you're always going through. And sometimes you realize you could have done something differently with somebody. I think the key to that is to just confess it. Like, wow, I was really crappy there. But at least confessing it, you may make a better choice the next time. But in terms of, I think if we engage, going back to liking and or unity, if we engage it the right way, it starts to shift that individual as a means to an end because I want to get the sale or whatever the case may be. And I will give you an example that many years ago, I have a client, they've been an awesome client. And as I was working with them, the person who's the VP of sales said, hey, I'm not sure there's going to be any opportunity the way the economy is. And I told him, I said, that's okay. I said, I really like you and I want to make sure we stay in touch. And so we continued to do that. And after our daughter got married 3.5 years ago, I sent an email and said, hey, Abigail got married. It was one of the best days of my life so far, and had a couple pictures. And well, he came back and said, that is great. He said, I just got engaged. Would you come to Germany for our wedding?
Wow.
Like, heck yes. That would be incredible. So Jane and I made our first trip to Central Europe and had a wonderful time. The wedding was incredible. Everything about it was great. So our friendship got deeper at that point. And there were things that went on during the wedding too that I felt like connected us even more deeply. Later, as we maintained our friendship, and I did the natural, hey, are you guys thinking about kids? And he said, yeah, but we're going to have to try in vitro for certain reasons. And I said, you know what? Our daughter was born through in vitro. I mean, now we are unitized because not very many people have gone through that process, but I was able to share with him the highs and lows and the success and the failures and just be a friend to him. By the grace of God, they're pregnant. They're going to have a little girl in December. But he and I, whether or not I ever do business with his company again, is almost irrelevant because of the connection and the friendship I have. But I also understand this, Pete, that if they have a need, they'll probably turn to me because he knows I genuinely care about him as a person. And I really care about the success of their organization as I've gotten to know about it and the individuals there. So those are the kind of things I think that transform business and relationships.
Beautiful. Thank you. Well, let's hear some ancient perspective on authority.
A great one with authority was, they said Jesus didn't speak like the scribes and the Pharisees. He spoke as one with authority. And how often we fall prey to the belief that we have to have positional authority. It helps if you have the corner office for sure. But what means a lot more, what we stress when we talk about being an authority, is being a trusted expert. Because your expertise and your trust can transcend any role that you have. And obviously that's what Christ had. He had the trust of the people and he had the expertise or the authority. And he proved that by not only what he was saying, but then he backed it up by doing, right? Anybody can say, hey, go in peace and be healed. Okay, you don't think I have the authority to do that? Let me show you I do. Get up and walk. And the paralytic got up and walked. So he is the example. And then the disciples became examples of that too, as many of them did miraculous things in his name.
Yes. And I'm thinking about, when we think about authority and trust, there are many ways that trust is subtly built and eroded in terms of your interactions and just sort of the life you live and what people can see from that. Especially I think when it costs us something. I think there's a great degree of moral authority that shows up when people say and do things for a higher good at their own cost or expense. And maybe because it seems somewhat rare that I just think, okay, that person is awesome. They have stature in my eyes. They have authority. And there's sort of a halo effect that goes on in terms of I naturally believe the things they are telling me are true and can be relied upon because I have witnessed virtue from this person.
Aristotle, I've often used this quote. He said, character may almost be called the most effective means of persuasion. If we lose reputation because we've broken trust, it can destroy, I mean, you and I have lived long enough that we've seen this, it can destroy a lifetime of work. And so therefore we have to be very careful. We don't want to act like we're, walking on eggshells, but we have to be very careful about always doing right by people. And I always tell the people that I work with, it's not enough to tell the truth. We don't hide the truth either. Because Pete, if you knew that I was holding something back that was material to your decision making, and then you made a decision and you would have made a different decision if you'd known that information, you will not be looking at me as a trustworthy person. You'll be saying, Brian, why didn't you bring up this point? And for me to say, well, Pete, you didn't ask is indefensible if I know that that would materially impact your decision. So we tell the truth and we never hide the truth. And I think if we have that as a general way that we go through life, we are getting much closer to being that person of integrity that people will willingly trust.
Well, now let's talk about some social proof.
With social proof, it's interesting that a lot of the things that are talked about in the Bible are kind of steering you away from social proof because in following God, you are swimming upstream. And we know that we can be influenced by other people, what many others are doing or what similar others are doing. And so a lot of the time we're having to actually warn people against that. It says that the way to destruction is broad and many are those who find it, but the way to life is narrow and few are those that find it. So that one's that we have to be very sensitive to how we use it. And even in today's day and age, quite often people use social proof incorrectly. Example, if somebody said, if they were a teacher at a university and they were to say to students, I just read a report that says 65% of students will cheat by the time they graduate. If I catch any of you cheating, I'll have you down in the dean's office and get you expelled. But what I've just done there is I planted a seed. 2 out of every 3 students cheat at some point in their academic career. And then all of a sudden somebody's stressed, they've got a lot of things going on and, well, I'll just do it this one time. But I have inadvertently set the stage to make it easier for them cognitively to make that decision. So it's a very interesting principle. We have to always utilize it to guide people in a direction that we want them to go. So if 2/3 of students were cheating, but that same report said cheating is on the decline, I'm going to talk about the fact that cheating is on the decline. Every year, 10% fewer students are cheating or something like that to try to get people thinking like, oh, this isn't something I should try. This isn't something I might get away with.
Yes, social proof is just in us. We tend to follow the crowd And so that's a good caution there, is to highlight that. And then I guess in a way, there's also a little bit of a streak in maybe some personalities that they want to be elite, rare, special, distinguished. And so I think there may be some personality type, or what would you want to call it?
Contrarian.
Yes. If that a contrarian streak to them, they're like, oh, well then, I think that's people who like conspiracy theories, for example. I think that's part of the appeal for them, is like, ooh, the vast majority of people have the completely wrong idea, but I and a few others, we really know what's up here. Although I guess in a way that's unity over there.
Well, they can be unitized with that small group who believes as they believe, but they are also, in a sense, tapping into scarcity. Everybody's doing this, but this is the thing over here. And of course, that intrigues us. We are also naturally drawn to something that's unique and different, rare, maybe not easily available. And so it just piques our interest, and all of a sudden you can take a step in that direction.
All right. Well, any other thoughts on scarcity?
With scarcity, that's replete throughout the Bible too. We're told to, as long as it is day to work, we don't know when night is coming. The Apostle Paul talked about the return of Christ. Nobody knows. Even Jesus said, nobody knows the day or the hour except the Father. That wasn't to scare people, but it was to get them to think, you know what? I don't want this whatever to happen tomorrow and regret that I didn't take action today. And so it really, I think it's there to incent us to always be looking to do the right thing, to live godly lives, to do right by others, to love them and things, because tomorrow's not guaranteed for anybody. And one of the worst things that we can do is be on the deathbed and think about all the stuff we didn't do that we wish we had. So I think it's a good way to look at life.
Well said. Well, Brian, tell me, anything else you want to make sure to mention here?
I think if people read the book, they're going to start to see more deeply these connections as John Andrews learns about these and has to deal with a faith-based community that's motivated differently than a secular community. And he's dealing with trying to get donations and volunteers. He's dealing with a city zoning board and the city council and having to also go there. But in no case does he ever abandon one or the other. He's always looking to say, okay, now that I understand that there seems to be this underpinning of these biblical tenets for these principles that have been so instrumental in my success in my career, how do I marry these two to be a more effective individual, whether I'm dealing with a secular or a faith-based community? Because in either case, we still, in large part, our success and happiness rests on getting people to say yes to us. But I hope people will see that we can go to a deeper level, a level that does right by people and allows us to feel really good about ourselves in the midst of that as well.
Beautiful. Thank you. Big thanks to Brian for sharing his wisdom with us, and big thanks to our sponsors. Check them out. One sponsor to check out is Vanguard. For all the financial advisors listening, let's talk bonds for a minute. Capturing value in fixed income is not easy. Bond markets are massive, murky, and a lot of firms will just throw a couple flashy funds your way and call it a day. But not Vanguard. Vanguard bonds provide top-grade products across the board. Their lineup includes over 80 bond funds actively managed by a 200-person global squad of sector specialists, analysts, and traders. Vanguard's been in the game for a long time at a scale that gives them a serious edge. They're able to invest across many sectors, maturities, and geographies, spotting opportunities that others might miss. Vanguard takes a steady approach, focusing on reliability and consistency. So if you're looking to give your clients consistent results year in and year out, go see the record for yourself at Vanguard.com/audio. That's Vanguard.com/audio. All investing is subject to risk. Vanguard Marketing Corporation, distributor. One sponsored checkout is Strawberry.me Career Coaching. Having real clarity and direction can make or break your career. If it seems like you're putting in the work but not seeing your career take off, some coaching might be just the ticket. Strawberry.me matches you with certified career coaches who help you gain clarity on what you really want next in your career, develop a results-driven strategy, and stay accountable. And they can also help you flourish beyond career issues. I had a fantastic session with my coach, Brett, about handling stress from so many responsibilities in so many areas. He was fun. He was wise. He just really got me. We had some laughs and a good time and a good rapport. And he gave me an exercise that has been so quick and so effective for me. I've been doing it every day. So if you're ready to take control and build momentum in your career, Go to strawberry.me/awesome to claim your $50 credit. That's strawberry.me/awesome. Because awesome careers don't just happen, you make them happen. One sponsor to check out is Quince. That nip in the air means two things. One, decorative gourd season is approaching. And two, it's time to check inventory on fall staples and fill in any gaps. And Quince can help with that masterfully, as they have all kinds of goodies you'll wear nonstop, such as a super soft 100% Mongolian cashmere sweater starting at $60. But that low price does not mean low quality. I've been loving my Quince beanie during these cooler temperatures. I treated that hat rough, but it keeps bouncing back and holding up like a champ. And Quince has really emerged as something of a go-to across the board. I keep seeing bags my wife orders from Quince appearing at our doorstep. So keep it classic and cool this fall with long-lasting staples from Quince. Go to quince.com/awesome for free shipping on your order and 365 days returns. That's QUINCE.com/awesome for free shipping and 365-day returns. One more time, quince.com/awesome. Well, now could you share a favorite book?
Robert Cialdini's book, Influence. When Bob read the first draft of the book, he loved it. He said, it's totally unique. He said, I have never read anything that has tried to connect faith-based tenets to my principles. And that was a huge compliment for me.
All right. And a favorite habit?
Favorite habit would certainly be working out. Every day I'm up 4:30 and go for a long walk. And then I come in and I work out for about 45 minutes and spend time stretching and try to get all that done by 6:15. So every day starts with that.
All right. And if folks want to learn more, get in touch, where would you point them?
First would be LinkedIn. And so if anybody is finding this interesting, if they start following me or if they reach out to connect, they're going to see something every day to help them learn a little bit more about how influence can help them in terms of their professional success and personal happiness. The other would be my website, which is influencepeople.biz. There's just a tremendous amount of information for people to really whet their appetite.
All right. And do you have a final challenge or call to action for folks looking to be awesome at their jobs?
Well, I'll say two things. One is this isn't really so much of the challenge, but I do want to make people know that if they order the book, which comes out on October 21st, if they send an email to booklaunch@influencepeople.biz and they tell me the name of the second chapter, I will send them a free version of the book, The Influencer. So the prequel to this book, they'll get that for free. As far as what I want them to take away from this, I would hope that it gets people thinking more about these principles beyond just how can I get what I want. That's very important. It's very important to succeed at your job and all the benefits that that can do for like college education, vacations, all those things. They're wonderful. But there's something that's more important. And I hope that having listened to this conversation, they might start thinking more deeply about that.
All right. Brian, thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. It's always a pleasure to talk with you, Pete.
I really love what Brian has to say about reciprocity, generosity, love, and how that just goes a long way in terms of actually getting other people to do what you want them to do. And I have a lot of incoming messages asking me to do stuff for people, total strangers, like buy my product, book a demo. And relatively few messages incoming that are just full of kindness, appreciation, generosity, helping me out proactively. And those are the folks that I really do want to help out. And so that stuff really does go a long way and feels good when you do it. So lovely perspectives from Brian. If you want to check out the show notes or the transcript or the links to items that we've referenced, please drop on by awesomeatyourjob.com/EP1104. Hope to catch you next time, and peace.